Hola. Bueno, le vamos.
Okay, so we are 15 minutes behind schedule in our revolution. We hope that we can make up for lost time during the session. Turn now to introduce Cimarro. First, I have to say that in January of 2012, we read some statements by Blanca Portillo explaining the reasons why she quit as the director of the Festival of Mérida. And many of us skipped a breath because the reasons she was explaining, the reasons she explained to quit her position, presented a picture that another festival was going to be swept over by the tsunami of the economic crisis. Of course, all festivals are different, so they don't add up. They all want to become singular, they all want to become their own, they want to have their own identity landmarks. But in the case of the Mérida festival, this was not just another festival. It's not just another festival. Mérida is also the Republican passion of Marita Xirgu in 1933, quoting Medea or Cipriano Rivas Sheriff or Enrique Borras. Mérida is also the best place to find the wisdom of Pepe Mérida, according to what urban legend has it. Is Nuria's part telling the storm to stop so that she could continue could continue speaking in the voice of Medea. And Luis Pascual claims that the storm stopped so that Bert could continue with her performance of Medea, and when the performance finished, the storm broke out in Mérida and in the world. That is Mérida. And therefore, after hearing the statements by Blanca Portillo, we thought that that was the portrayal of a bankrupt festival, and that unfortunately political tensions, because Blanca Portillo had been designated by the prior administration, everything seems to point towards the direction of a bad future, a poor future. But at that point, we didn't know what Monago would be like. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank, on behalf of all of us who love theater, to thank Jesús Cimarro. I'd like to thank him because Mérida didn't die. I'd like to thank him on behalf of the world of theater because Mérida not only didn't die, but it showed incredible health. I met Jesús Cimarro at the beginning of the 1980s when we both were 30 years younger. Cimarro comes from Erma, and at that point there was a very strong movement, theater movement in the Basque country around Geroa. Geroa had organized a show that came to Galicia, the Luisiane Hall in A Coruña, theater in A Coruña, and it was the accidental death of an anarchist by Dario Fo. He was responsible for all this, and I say this because Jesús Cimarro nowadays is an acknowledged producer, and he was at the origin of this movement, building a possible country, a possible theater for a new country. I say all of this because we could state the triviality that Jesús Cimarro is a producer who loves theater. This is obvious, this is cliché, but I think Cimarro due to the fact that he loves theater, he became a producer. And within the different professions within theater, I think that production is the most distasteful in terms of not getting the applause. They're always behind, and when things go wrong, it's always the producer people go against. But when things go well, nobody remembers the producer. Nobody remembers that there was a producer behind the success. These past days have been intense days for Jesús Cimarro. He has been given an important award, the Palm of the Contemporary Theatre Festival in Alicante, precisely due to his work with Spanish playwrights. And we have to say that Cimarro is not a usual producer. Within Spanish playwrights, he has worked with the plays of Jesús Luis Alonso de Santos, Javier Tomín, Fernando Fernán Gómez, Jordi Galcerán, Paco Mir, Carlos Alberola, and Pepe Sánchez Sinisterra, or Pere Riera. So in these times in which what is normal, what is evident, what is logical is to put the blame on the crisis for everything, Jesús has showed incredible intelligence and an incredible capacity to fly over these situations, and this has allowed the Festival of Mérida to get back on track in just 2 editions, and it has surprised us all with its strong muscle and immediate impact. So once again, thank you very much, Jesús, for making Mérida stay alive. You have the floor now. Thank you very much, Manuel. You're right, it was 30 years ago that we first met. And time sometimes gives us the distance to see this generation, the generation that started at the beginning of the 80s, and that we can actually speak in favor of cultural production better than most of the politicians who want to restructure our sector unwillingly, and though it is necessary to restructure the sector. In my presentation, and I hope that we have time for the discussion, and I hope there's some controversy because I will be making some statements that may not be politically correct, but that's what I think. First, I'd like to thank the organizers of this meeting, of this forum, that they representatives of different festivals that are very specific in terms of their sites: Avignon, Edinburgh, Mérida, Segovia, La Mar de Músicas. There's a wide variety of proposals and festivals, and I think that we all make up the idiosyncrasy of European culture in a way. And that's great. It's great that we have forums in which we can come together and we can develop. Performing arts can do without an assessment or an evaluation after it is conducted, so that we have indicators to see our mistakes, successes, and the improvement needed for the future. This is, of course, the case of the International Classical Theatre Festival in Mérida. We are now into the preparation of the 60th edition. And let me stop here and tell you a little bit about the history of the festival. I'm sure you're familiar with this festival. It started in 1933, that is to say, this is the 80th anniversary in 2013. It's one of the longest living anniversary, the ancient festivals, as Paulo said, and in Spain and in Europe. But it is in its 59th edition. In 2014, we have the 60th edition. Why? Because this country went through some events during the past century, through the Civil War and post-war, in which there was no money for culture. And people were struggling to make a living in this country. There was a period between 1940 to almost the 1960s where the festival didn't take place. During this first period, since 1933, where Margarita Chico, as Manuel Guedes said, opened with Medea and presided over, it was Manuel Azaña, the president of the Spanish Republic at that time, who presided over this. The festival of Mérida has gone through a republic, a dictatorship, and then a democracy within a monarchy. That is 3 different regimes in the past century for a festival, for better or worse. In this third forum, which is a place for reflection, we're also joined in the analysis of the data generated by these events. I'm going to share some data with you. Sometimes people claim that I am too pragmatical, that I look very much at numbers, and I did not pay so much attention to cultural events. Many people are against me because of that, but I accept criticism very well. And I say, if we have data, then that means that we've done something. So the festival in Mérida, unfortunately, and as Manuel was saying, in 2011, it went through its worst edition and it was about to disappear. It was working on a very important deficit, and it was already carrying or lagging with a larger deficit. So we had the festival. When I got the festival, we had 4 million euros in debt when I became the person responsible for the festival. In the last 2 editions, I'd like to share some data about the last 2 editions, and we will see why, in my understanding, we have this renaissance of the festival, a festival that should never have been in the situation it was. We should not deny this. I'd like to share the success with you, the success that it means to have made it in our decisions in terms of management with a new model. That's not easy. And this is a new model that is not as new as it seems, but it has been adapted to our current situation. So we're speaking about a wonderful scene, a wonderful stage, the Roman theater of Mérida. This is, again, for better or worse, a very special space where we have these remains. It's 2,000 years old, this theater. We see 52 meters, a stage of 52 meters width and 7 meters in depth. And there, that's where the theater troops perform. I'm going to focus, of course, the history is quite long. I will be focusing on the 2 past years in which I was the director of this festival. The festival takes place during the months of July and August, in the summer in the southwest of Spain. In Extremadura, this is a region with very specific and complex features. And to some extent, the inhabitants of Extremadura see this festival as their most important cultural engine. This festival, in order to survive in the future, needs to be thinking about its past, and it definitely needs attention to its creative aspects through rational and sustainable management. These are intentionally my first words about the festival, about this project and about its reality. And we will see this is the map that any cultural project should go through. After managing for 25 years a cultural enterprise, when I was asked to direct the Mérida festival and the circumstances in which it was at that time, I thought that this was a challenge for me and for my company. And I had to face our discourse from a practical perspective. And our discourse was and still is feasibility of our cultural heritage through mixed management formulas. We had to go up a step in management. We had to take a new step in management. We have to dare because we believe in what we do. Public institutions have managed, along with private companies, have managed to sustain the theater landscape in this country. Why shouldn't we then come together when the public tools are no longer there in order to develop and maintain our theater fabric? In the proposal of the government of Extremadura, I found the answer to these challenges, and I assumed and I accepted that Pentation, my company, and myself were ready to direct the 58th and 59th edition of the Mérida Festival. I've always advocated for this mixed management approach. Throughout my whole career, I've advocated for this cooperation between the private and public sector in order to overcome the difficulties of production, distribution, and theater performances in our country. It's time to show that we can be successful and accomplish our objectives successfully if we do it together. There are many difficulties ahead, difficult years ahead, but we will manage to overcome those obstacles if we walk together with a single goal in mind, to preserve what's ours, which is not ours alone, it belongs to everyone. Culture is the heritage of everyone. It doesn't matter who manages it. What is important is it is well and properly managed. We're speaking here about enthusiasm and participation of thousands of audiences. We always have to think about the audience. The motto of my company and my motto as a producer has always been the importance of audiences. I always say this very clearly. I produce for the audience wherever they are. Audiences are our top priority. They make us different, and it is what allows us to set an objective, the objective that we, at least those who are doing the management, should have. We are there for them, or at least that's my criteria. You see the theater, it's a monument, it's a space. Yes, as I said, it's a World Heritage Site. It's empty. This is a monument where we have visits. We have daily visits of hundreds of thousands of people every year. And this is what I like seeing it, with performances and with an audience, a diversified, varied, mass audience. Because we should not forget that this space has 3,000 seats, and we have to produce, and we'll see it in a minute, we have to produce for this space, for this environment. These are some introductory ideas, and now we will see, I'll go into my experience, and the experience I've gathered thanks to the development of this project and the direction of this festival, because the objective of this forum is to share, debate and question and reach a place in which we can find common ideas and values. In February 2012, the government of Extremadura commissioned 3 companies in the sector to develop a project for the 58th edition of the International Classical Theatre Festival of Mérida. This was not the first time that they outsourced management. Some people have said, oh, this is a shame, this is being privatized. This was not privatized. This is still a public festival, having its own trustees, but it is managed by a private institution. This is not bad. What's bad is if it is badly done. That's different. But this is the cooperation between public and private institutions. The problem is when this is not done properly. In the 1990s, the Mérida Festival was outsourced for 6 years. This was during the socialist government of Ibarra. And this was done. As I've said, this is something I've said to many who have questioned the outsourcing of this. I always say, if Ibarra did it and it worked, why shouldn't we do it now? At least you have to give some margin for people who are directing this, give us some margin to make our own mistakes or to make our own right choices. And that is what I advocate for as a producer and as a cultural manager. I've always claimed this. The same thing exactly as artists claim, the right to make mistakes. The problem is that when you make a mistake in management, and when you're using somebody else's money, then there you face a problem. And especially it is a problem when you're working with your own money. As I've said, this is not the first time. This was a company in Extremadura, and it managed it during this period. And throughout the history of the Mérida Festival, those were important years and years of splendor when they used this type of management approach. The project selected was that of my company, and I had as a director an arts director or artistic director. And people were wondering, how can a producer become the art director of a festival of this kind? Of course, that's logical. Many, as Manuel said, do not know what the role of producers is. I see myself as an atypical producer because I'm an economic producer and I'm also an artistic producer. This doesn't mean that I don't have the capacity to at least try to direct. And I face this challenge because I could have hired somebody, a director, as I usually do, with my own shows. I've produced more than 150 shows, and I could have hired so many directors working for me. But I said no. I said that this was a challenge. It was a challenge for me to show that you can have a producer as an artistic director. It was a challenge, and it was also I had a feeling of vertigo and fear. As I said, this is how artists see the theater from the stage, and this is how the audiences see the theater from their seats in this Roman amphitheater, in this Roman theater. These are two completely different points of view, from the point of view of the artist and from the point of view of the audience, from the point of view of the funding institutions, or from funders, from those who come to see the show. As I said, this project was selected by a company, Pentación. This is an integrated production company who has been working for 25 years in theater. It was founded in 1988 in a very specific way. It was an author, a director, an actor, and a producer who got together. So we have the 4 legs of this business present in the beginnings of Pentación, of the theater business, because I think that this is a business. It has to be managed by whoever it is, and then I will refer to this as well. Throughout our history as a company in relationship to the Festival of Mérida, our cooperation is not new. Since 1989, my company has worked with the different directors, Leon, with the different directors who had managed the, and I had produced 8 shows during this festival. So I did know the kind of shows that were to be developed for this space. It was not new for me. The Roman theater of Mérida was not new for me. We had shows such as Anfitrión, I, Claudio, and others which I had produced in the Roman theater of Mérida, and they had been full. Because one of the things, for better or worse, that this space has is that this is a theater with 3,000 seats. So if you're going to experiment and you're only going to have 300 people, then it looks very sad. And that's why we have opened an off program for a smaller space for 250, 300 people, so that we can have shows that do not require this pressure of having the pressure of this huge space. The company has had premieres in different international festivals. We have co-produced shows, and we know, for example, in the production and distribution and that are part of the theater event. And I'm giving you this hint because some people have not understood how a producer can see the artistic and economic side of this festival has managed to be successful on both sides. And I'll give you these references because I think that this is important. It's important to understand who's behind and what kind of structure is behind the direction of the Mérida Festival. The Board of Trustees of this festival includes the Government of Extremadura, the Ministry of Culture, the Municipality of Mérida, the Provincial Government of Badajoz and Cáceres, and 3 savings banks with their trusts. This is a festival, as I was saying, that's completely public. It's managed by this Board of Trustees, who have decided to outsource management. And they demand accountability, both in the artistic and financial sense of the term. My company and myself got this proposal to have a 4-year contract to make this project work. And I said, no, I want to sign year by year. And that if it didn't work out, they should kick me out. And that's what I said, literally. They should kick me out, because I do think that a public institution, citizens cannot afford to have bad management, because this money belongs to all of us, and I think that with the money of all of us we cannot play. And that's why I said this. This is not just a boutade. This is something I was very clear about. I was really scared of failure, because there was a huge deficit already attached to this festival, and what was still worse, the audience had turned their backs to this festival. So this is a huge risk, and I didn't want to face it for 4 years. If I succeeded, then I could renew my contract. If I didn't, then I didn't have to. And then we'll see how the 58th edition was and the 59th edition as well.
We have to have a clear idea that we have to produce for this incredible setting. The difficult, that's the Roman theatre in Mérida. Within private production, there is a specific modality that refers to the shows that are taking place in festivals that then have to be adapted to other venues. For many years, the Mérida Festival has only produced shows for that setting. and all the shows were performed there. And that was perhaps a mistake. In fact, the 8 shows that I had produced before I became the director always revolved, except for one, they all revolved around different festivals and different theatres. And I think it's a crime to invest an amount of money that may be €500,000 to produce a show that is only visible in one individual setting. That's my idea. It might sound strange, but I think that with public funding, since they are invested, they have to be visible at the end of the day. They have to be also taken to other venues. The Mérida festival assembles many of the complexities that we don't find in other venues or other settings. So it's very difficult to produce, as I said before, in such a circumstance. The first thing that a producer has to propose to those who are responsible for organizing the festival, when proposing a show, is how viable the proposal is. If the show is going to be viable for such an environment, both regarding the artistic aspect and also the economic side. On the one hand, the question has to be, what kind of show do we want? Because one of the features that the Mérida festival has is that it has a Greco-Roman or Greco-Latin essence, and that none other than that is to be done. Greek and Roman plays with different viewpoints or approaches, but it's somehow limited to that. Very few plays can actually be performed. From management, we proposed to the art teams different modalities. The festival during this new stage is not producing but co-producing, because the budget that we had 3 years ago was almost €4 million, and the budget that I had in the 58th edition was of €2,400,000, out of which the administration was bringing forward €1.5 million. That's why I feel jealous of the €12 million that the Avignon Festival has. It's a healthy jealousy. As I said, the option was for co-production, because the festival could not do much with the budget. Because going down from 4 million to 2.5 million entailed limited capability. We have to dress up the Roman monument with lighting, with stages, and I had €1 million for programming to produce 7 shows, full shows. And so the model I applied was co-production. I thought that would be the most viable one, to decide which shows to choose, and not only because we had the stage at the Roman Theatre, we also had other venues that had to be catered for. And I'll explain in a minute why I say so. Because when my company signed the contract with the regional government to manage the festival, as I said, the financial contribution made by the regional government at the time was €1.4 million, and it included, the festival cost 2.3 million, so we had to raise an enormous amount of money through ticket sales, and if we didn't achieve the ticket sales, then my company would have to pay for the gap. So I was really scared. You can imagine that if it were to rain, or if the shows were to be a failure, we wouldn't. If we hadn't raised the 900,000 euros through ticket sales, then my company would have to have put up the difference. And any surplus from ticket sales, 85% of it I would have to give back to the regional government. And my profit would only be 15% of this surplus. Some people have said to me that's they've been real bastards in the negotiation. And I said, well, it's been a complicated negotiation. And I say so because it's public. Because one of the things that I've done throughout managing this is we don't only have the artistic side, but we also have managing public funds. And I have always accounted for every cent that I have spent with invoices and all the paperwork, which was not a regular thing in other editions of the festival prior to my time. The 58th edition of the festival, that's the one that I have, the first one that I managed, had a very clear idea that we had to combine the artistic side, the financial side, and the communication side. Once again, this festival had to be put back in the position that it had many years ago, that it had almost lost. It had to be delivered back the image and the outreach at the national level. We had to involve the media to become interested again in the programming of this festival. So we chose a leitmotif for the festival, and that was Greece. The year 2012, in Europe, Greece had been intervened by the European authorities, and so we thought it was very important to tie the Greece of today to classical Greece. That's why the show that opened up the edition was called Helade, which is the Greek name for Greece. In a sense, we were trying to find similarities. So we had a special opening show, and I managed to bring very renowned artists in Spain who had never set foot on a stage in Mérida to be there. And one of the things that I chose to say to artists for them to come to Mérida, none of them wanted to come, because they wanted to boycott the festival because they were not being paid. So one thing that I said to the president of the regional government is that everyone has to be paid. We have to regain our credibility. We have to pay the artists. We have to get the money from wherever. And he replied, well, the money has no funding. It's not a part of the budget. We'll have to ask for a loan. So we asked for a loan of 3 million euros, and we paid every one of the artists. We paid back 80% of the debt. But I insist, we paid the artists. And so I said to them, they had to be accomplices, so to speak. That was the word that I used over and over again with the artists and with the media. Complicity. In order for the festival to become what it had been in the past, and for the public to come back to the shows. We designed a strategic communications plan, a very powerful one. I decided to spend a large sum of money on communication and promotion, for the festival. It was very important to go back to recover not only the regional audience but also the nationwide audience and some audiences from abroad, from Portugal across the border, and also from Latin American countries that had in the past also attended the festival. So we drafted a communication plan. I think that was the pillar for success. Of course, the programming too, but especially this communication that we achieved to transmit to the domestic audience. That was one of the keys for success. The first step to properly manage audiences is decide how, who, and when we're going to report on the programmed activities. I had 1.5 months to design the programming for the festival. I was appointed in March of 2012, and I submitted the program in May of that same year. In other words, it's normally done throughout a full year, and I only had 1.5 months to organize the program and to submit it. It was submitted, presented at the end of May 2012, and the festival was starting in July. This was one of the problems. There was practically no time to communicate. That's why it was so important to have a strategic communication plan and leave nothing to improvisation. With this communication plan, this was the leitmotif of this edition. Mérida is classical, Mérida is theatre. In the past it had been when night falls, the magic of theatre starts. In this case it was Mérida is classical, Mérida is theatre. This communication strategy had one clear point. The image was studied, the image was designed, and a distinctive feature. We adopted the color orange for all the image of the festival. And so we have defined ourselves by changing the image of the festival to make it easy to identify in whichever support medium we may be presenting it. The corporate color for all its applications. More specifically, what you see here is the motto And of course, we had a round of contacts with the media before we applied the communication strategy. Some of the media were really opposing us, important media, influential media such as the newspapers El País, El Mundo, La Razón, ABC at the national level. These newspapers were saying that our model should be quarantined and many other things too. We had to gain their trust at all levels with the communication teams. We had advertising, posters, online communication, Web 2.0. Everything was key for this projection. Once the programming was drafted, we had to sell it. And we had to sell tickets, because obviously one of the keys of the programming is marketing the tickets. We had to expand. There was only one way of selling tickets. And I said I want to sell through all these saleable media or saleable outlets and for all types of audiences. I want everyone to come to my festival. So we had to negotiate with the large ticket offices We also organized packages for people to buy the train ticket, the hotel, and the ticket or the plane ticket or a rent-a-car, whatever, plus hotel, plus ticket. Do not forget that Extremadura is right on one end of Spain and the communications are not too good. So there were different prices, as you can see. The tickets ranged from 12 to 39 euros. There are 6 different prices. We reached agreements with tour operators so they could sell the tickets with other packages. Many different tour operators that you have on the left column on the slide. They were selling tickets, and I wanted to make the most of all the available sales channels to sell tickets and reach the maximum number of people possible. Another innovation of ours is what we call the accessible theatre. Do not forget that this is a public festival and it has to be available to all kinds of audiences. One thing was clear. We fully believed in this aim of an accessible theatre because there's a social aim. The performing arts must be universally accessible. For this reason we decided to establish the first fully universal accessibility edition of the festival with a series of means. The corporate social responsibility of any project must also cater for those that are excluded. We have to achieve shared entertainment, which is the main goal of this universal accessibility that should be provided at any performance venue. The disabled are usually deprived of these experiences, so this is a way to aim at social inclusion. Also, sensorial accessibility, which is a simple solution that is committed with society and also profitable. Understanding that physical accessibility is already achieved in different ways for the disabled to access, having eliminated architectural barriers in a 2,000-year-old building, our proposal was also to provide universal accessibility to the festival, allowing for those with visual impairment, or in other words for the blind and the deaf, to also benefit from the festival. These are communication barriers that were lifted by the following measures: adapted subtitles for the deaf so they could follow the plays, self-description with similar devices as those that you're using for the simultaneous interpretation, where the blind or the elderly in general with hearing difficulties could follow the play. Magnetic loops. The visually impaired cannot see, but they can be transmitted a message of what is going on stage. We achieved accessibility in such a masterpiece of a setting that is the Roman theatre of Mérida, expanding the opportunities of the magic of classical theatre to the disabled. This was a challenge, but yet we are very proud of our achievements. We achieved at the Vodafone Foundation to sponsor this too. Why did we have this goal, this aim for accessibility? Because in the previous season I was directing or managing 2 theatres in Madrid. We tried something similar and were successful, so we decided that it would be a good idea to also use it in Mérida. Besides, in the year 2012, apart from achieving universal accessibility for the festival, we also achieved the job insertion of disabled persons by signing an agreement with the Spanish Association for the Job Insertion of Down Syndrome persons. In our corporate social responsibility framework, our company created jobs for Down syndrome patients by means of special contracts during the length of the festival. We had a very clear aim to insert these people, and this was another thing that we also used to convince the media. We thought it was necessary to give the festival a different, renovated image. As you may see, the programming is not only for the Roman theatre, but there were other events, the off events, Passacaglia, workshops, conferences, an international forum of festivals, and the first edition of the series Awards for Theatre. Different shows were programmed, all relating to the Greco-Roman world, and bringing together great plays with great actors. One of the agreements I reached with the regional government was to involve local actors that had up to that time been relegated or neglected, because the local theatre companies were not performing at the festival in Mérida. And so, as a part of the contract signed with the Board of Trustees of the festival, I had to invest 190,000 euros to have local companies present. And I said that I would not invest 190,000, but more. I proposed to have 2 shows co-produced by the festival with local companies to perform at the closure of the festival. And in 2012, the festival spent 325,000 on local theatre companies. I thought it was also very important to involve the local drama people into the festival. And it would be incredible to see that someone from outside of the region was the one that was vindicating this for the local people. It's a way of involving the locals and also achieving social peace. We held a meeting with international festival managers and directors from Spain and outside of Spain, Europe and Latin America. And we reached a series of conclusions. We held 2 days of meetings, and we discussed what was going on with European festivals and festivals in general. What was happening to the model, to the programming, to the promotion. All of this was discussed. The relationship of Latin America with Europe, what joins us, what separates us, in management or the artistic side of festivals. The relationship among festivals, co-productions, the mixed public-private funding, the raise of VAT, and how it affected the festival then, because VAT was raised to 21%, and I insist at every forum, if our dear authorities would bring back VAT to decent levels. And then the series awards, They were very much criticized. However, it was clear to me that I wanted the festival to have a sort of a colophon, a national award-giving ceremony, and the critics would be the ones to give the awards. So we created this awards ceremony that was broadcast on the regional and also on the national television. The first edition was watched by 200,000 viewers, and the second edition was watched by 400,000. This gala used the technique of mapping. It cost money, it cost 600,000 euros. And regional companies were involved. Workshops were carried out related to the world of Greece and Rome in 20 towns of Extremadura, and 20 companies from the region taught these seminars or workshops. 25 companies from Extremadura worked at the first edition, and the second edition has seen 30 regional companies collaborating with the festival. There were many interesting conclusions from the festival forum that we held. This is the flowchart that I created for the festival of Mérida. One of the conditions that I asked the Board of Trustees of the regional government was that I didn't want anyone from the previous team. I have no problem in acknowledging this. I said that I wanted to create a totally brand new team. One of the reasons whereby Blanca Portillo made a mistake in her management, I think it's high time that we may say it, and she has acknowledged it too, is that she inherited a team with lots of problems, and that's negative for management. So I wanted to establish a brand new team. 90% of the members were local. Only the communication and production heads were people from Madrid. Everyone else was local. I insisted on that. Here you have all the elements in the festival. Some 500 people altogether have worked to organize the festival in this recent edition. In the year 2012, the festival saw an increase by 26% in audiences compared to 2011, with a total of 67,000 plus audience. And 198,000 euros surplus from ticket sales that was reimbursed to the consortium that organized the festival. In other words, we had managed to overcome the barrier of 900,000 euros, and we had increased the audience base tremendously. In 2013, we carried out a new promotion scheme introducing certain elements. The orchestra of Extremadura was about to be dismantled when I arrived there, and this year they were in charge of opening the Mérida festival, together with the National Spanish Ballet, for the performance of Medea. The programming was completed with dance, music, and also cinema. So we had theatre, we had street performances, and we were clear about opening up the programming to all the performing arts. So we had a very varied, eclectic and differentiated programming, as I said before. The previous year we had a meeting with festival directors, and this year we also assembled all the directors of the Cervantes institutes in the world, and we decided that they should get together at the Roman Museum in Mérida. This was not necessarily exactly related to the festival, but we wanted Mérida to become a point of reference. And the 80 directors of the Cervantes institutes across the world could see Julius Caesar. That was the programming that was ongoing at the time. And besides, there was a meeting at the Europe-wide level to analyze the impact of theatrical shows in heritage sites, World Heritage sites, monuments. So what was the impact? This was a very interesting meeting. Because of all the implications of performing in a heritage building. And of course, we hosted the second edition of these series awards. We had other off programs. This meeting presided over by the Prince and Princess of Asturias. This is an important part, the relationship of culture and heritage. The infrastructures, management and open air venues, acoustic pollution, the deterioration of cultural fields, the degradation of historic centers. We decided that the environmental impact on such spaces had to be limited. And since we're running out of time, this is the gala for the series awards. There's one major prize, the Emerita Augusta. We have managed for important actors and actresses of national drama to be represented there. And one of them had performed Medea on 5 occasions. It was a privilege. This Nuria Espert, a very famous Spanish actress. And this is the general balance of the edition for 2012. The festival grew 40% with regards to the previous year. It's the year 2013, sorry. 40% more audience spectators than the previous year. 74,000 plus spectators paid a ticket to watch a play. A huge increase. Overall, 87,800 plus people attended the festival. The profit from ticket sales was 456,000 euros that a couple of days ago have been handed over to the Board of Trustees to pay off the debt. So in 2 years of management we have collected 640,000 euros that have been delivered. It has been proven that it can be done, but it's sheer madness. In the 60th edition we have achieved for the debt that is being paid 600,000 euros a year that erode the opportunities of the festival. They have now been included into the budget in order for the management of the festival not to have this sort of Damocles hanging over them. I said we have achieved 75,000 spectators in 30-something shows, and we can reach a limit of 100,000 because there is no room for more. So at least we have was handed over to the manager of the festival. This was the show, but the real thing has been done just a few days ago. I'll give some data now. Increase over 2012, 21,000 spectators, 70-something% occupation. This is a comparison. At the Roman Theatre in Mérida, 2011, 42,500 spectators. 2012, 53,392. And in 2013, 74,583. So the figures speak for themselves, clearly. We have achieved selling out certain shows, up to 3,300 tickets. And here we have the data of the origins of our audience, the data that we have of the people who have paid with a credit card, to know where they come from. Otherwise, we don't know. Those who pay cash at the ticket office, we don't know where they're from. But out of 25,000 plus people who have paid their tickets with a credit card, we do know where they come from. And you can compare 2012, 2013, the regions of Spain where these people come from. This is important for us in order to then design the communication campaigns for such regions of Spain. Out of the 75,000 plus people who came, 10,000 plus are from Extremadura. This is people who paid with credit cards. 6,500 in Madrid, 3,000 plus in Andalusia. Other regions of Spain, even from remote locations. At least we know now where the audience comes from. This is clear. Either we have a clear idea of where the public is coming from, or we have nothing to do. And these are tools that I think that the management of any festival must bear in mind when programming, in order to know where to insist on communication. And here we have the comparison, and we can see for 2012 to 2013 how internet sales have grown. This is an important item. In the year 2012, we started selling tickets at the end of May, and this year we have made the official presentation in March, so a couple of months before the previous year. That's why anticipated ticket sales has grown twofold. And so we know how much audience we may be getting, and thus we may insist on the shows that have less advanced tickets sold to promote them further, to sell more tickets. Some more data. Media repercussion. This is one thing that I am very much obsessed with. This year there have been in excess of 2,200 news items published compared to only 1,100 in the year previous. In the written press, 900 as opposed to 500. Radio clips, 494 as opposed to 407. TV, 133 news pieces compared to 44 in the previous year. And out of the 133 news pieces on TV, what I'm very much impressed is that 50 of them were the last news on the nationwide broadcaster news, the national TV station and all the private TV stations. In other words, we had managed for the nationwide media to conclude their news editions with a news piece on our festival. This, for me, was the quantum leap of reconciliation with the audience on the one hand and the media, who started to believe in us again. We've had public surveys conducted, more than 2,000 surveys. And what they have most valued is the programming. So when my detractors say that I only speak of figures, I say I speak of figures because I have figures to speak of. Because there has been programming and good management behind that for these figures to be there. And I'm about to wrap up.
Conclusiones, voy a las conclusiones.
I'll go straight to my conclusions. We have to speak in favor of the role of people and also of public-private joint venues, joint enterprises. It has been proven that the model is a good one, without at all detracting from artistic quality. In the case of the Mérida Festival, we have sought the balance from two viewpoints. We have to always seek the balance between the financial management and the artistic management. In this day and age, we need such collaboration. In the case of the festival, as other institutions, it doesn't matter whether the initiative is public or private, it has to have the right management. This is the best way to value the existing models. Transparency is of the essence, especially towards the institution that commissions the festival, and also transparency in the financial budgeting. This year, one thing that I forgot to say, the companies from Extremadura, from the region, at the festival have received 425,000 euros to co-produce two important shows that may then go on tour. With this management model, the festival goes back to where it corresponds. Given the good results of the festival, we have been called by the European Festival Platform that wish us to be present there. We have been told that we have to be there. They want us. And as this forum, I think that the Merida Festival is where it must be. And all I have to add is one final conclusion. After this adventure that I have told you about, and facing the adventures of the future, we have a motto: culture needs rest to build and not haste to replace. Thank you and good afternoon.
Bueno, después de esta...
Okay, after this wonderful and intense presentation,
Si me permitides, voy a decir a Jesús algo.
if you allow me, I will tell Jesús that I think we should think about replacing, after listening to your wonderful experience these years as a producer and now as the director of the Mérida Festival, I think that you should definitely change your name, the name of your job, and you should be called Theatrical Wonderman, because this sounds like some kind of miracle. In theater, we have a motto when we speak about Avignon, we refer to this as a miracle, and now we have two miracles, the Avignon miracle and the miracle. If you allow me, I'd like to ask a question. In particular, Jesús, in Galicia, due to obvious cultural reasons, we are very sensitive to our links with Portugal. Mérida is also on the border, and historically speaking, the Festival of Mérida, also with Joaquín Benito, the festival of the Almada Festival, had joint initiatives. Have you considered maintaining this dialogue with Portugal? Yes, in fact, this summer we had the director of the Museum of the Arts of Lisbon. He was in our festival, and we're working with the 60th edition, and we will launch the festival in Lisbon too. And we've reached an agreement with a ticketing company to sell tickets in Portugal. And we're currently negotiating with a Portuguese company to take part in the festival. I didn't have time to speak about everything. But if we think about this from an artistic perspective, many people were saying there aren't international representatives. And I said, no, so far our budgets are complex, and I wanted to have the audiences back. I wanted the audience to be back and to feel comfortable in this festival, to step inside the theater or the temple of Diana or on the streets and feel that they're part of this festival. From now onwards, we are looking into this, and in the 60th edition we will have a couple of international shows, and we will try to introduce other facets of culture. I want to introduce circus and opera into the festival, and thus have a full circle of the cultural panorama in this festival. Because I do think that a festival must have all these elements. One of the things I couldn't explain, because I think that there are people here who are part of the artistic teams of shows. Whenever we think about a co-production or a show, I give total freedom to companies so that they themselves can create their own shows. We agree what the text is, what are the guidelines, the cast, director, etc. And then they're completely free. That's the same thing I do in my company. Artists have to create. I am there 15 days before just to see the rehearsals and share my opinion. But my opinion may be listened to or not. I let them be free in their creation, and that's what I really believe in, and that's how I've been successful in my company too, because I think that we have to respect the work of artists. Are there any questions?
Sí, hablaba de la
Yes, we were referring to the importance you gave to communication and dissemination, and you mentioned the budget you had for programming, and I'd like to know what budget you had for communication. What percentage is it within the general budget, and with this effort and strategy that you've implemented to involve the media in the festival, what were the arguments you used to spark their interest? The budget that we had for communication was 200,000 euros. But those are the final figures. But we come to agreements with all the media representatives. I didn't have time to discuss sponsorship and agreements, cooperation agreements that I've signed with different operators. On the one hand, with the media, during the first year, they had invested a fortune in paid adverts, and I said, we don't have money, I have seats. So if you want, I exchange seats for publicity. And I reached agreements with national radio stations, TV stations, and with the written press. This was key, because otherwise we can't pay for such advertising. If we did, 10% of what a page costs in a newspaper or a magazine was what I invested. But I found Kafkian situations and perverse situations. At the beginning I used to discuss them, but now I don't discuss them anymore, because when I came, the whole city of Mérida was full of posters, and I asked for a budget for the edition for 2012 for such posters, such banners, and the supply company gave me a terribly high budget, and I said, in Madrid, I get charged half of what you want to charge. So we had a truck coming from Madrid with 6 operators, and it's cheaper. How can you charge double? And then he said, yeah, it will take you 1 or 2 years to pay, so at least you have to pay this much. So that was the situation. I said, no, we will pay immediately. So this is one of the things that I've done. I've submitted the accounts at the end of each edition. We had a public dissemination of these accounts, which is this thick, and also for the Extremadura Parliament with each invoice, with the wages and the payment receipt. They were all attached for each of the budget lines, because that was something I was very clear about. I was sure that they were going to analyze my actions, both the opposition and the government itself, and citizens in general. I've said this very clearly. Money has to be very clear. We have to be accountable for this money. Sponsors had disappeared because sponsors are very scared of controversy. And this festival was controversial due to lack of payment. And the Revenue Office was already sending warnings of embargo to sponsors to pay the debts that the festival had with the Social Security and with the Revenue Office. So this was a terrible, terrible scenario. All sponsors had disappeared, and you have the balance within this leaflet. You have the board of trustees and different sponsors. For example, we had Reale, this is an insurance company, and in the catalog of 2012 I introduced them here, and they said, no, I don't want to be there, I don't want to give you any money. So you have to trust. I had a meeting with, this is an Italian insurance firm, and I said, you have to trust us. Don't give me anything. Let me have your name. Most of the sponsors who were there didn't give any money. I said, please trust me. You have to make this bet. Don't give me a single penny. You will do it in the future. And this year, of course, they paid. Because we had to show them some trust. There was a breach of trust, and they had fled. This is the same of what happened in the country. Capital fled, but once they feel this trust, they come back. We had to convey this trust. We have to communicate it. And we have different companies. For example, the official transport for the festival is Renfe. They didn't give us any money, but they have publicity in the high-speed train, had the logo. All seats had the logo of the festival. So we've had many exchanges of publicity because this is what we have. We have different kinds of supports to communicate.
Buenas tardes. En primer lugar,
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you for being here and sharing your experience of the Mérida Festival. I think that for anyone who loves theatre and cultural management, I'm fascinated with the data when the festival closed, and I'd like to ask you about a hot topic nowadays in the press. Last week we heard about the management of public theaters in Madrid by Destino, this company. And speaking about mixed management, I think that there must be different ways of doing it, and I'd like to know your opinion and whether you can give us any information about this. A month ago, I was delivering a lecture in the theatre fair of Ciudad Rodrigo in Castile, And the person who introduced me said, 3 years ago, Jesús spoke in the same forum where he was booed. And that's true. Because I said something 3 years ago, which was, I want that the restructuring is done by the cultural sector, not by politicians. Because if the politicians do it, we will disappear, and this is what's happening. This sector has not been has not exercised self-criticism, and we have had some good years where there was much money, and what I'm going to say may not sound nice, but we have a cultural bubble, same as we had other bubbles in our country. So when we woke up, we were just shocked, we were slapped, and we were like, oh, I don't understand anything, what's going on? We had much. They are not sustainable. And apart from anything else, I have to say that I am for the public sphere, but we have to see the measure of it. I've always been in the private sector since I was 18, and I'm now 48. I've always put my money on the table, and I've ruined myself twice, but I'm really clear about this. We have to have public initiative to the extent that's needed, and civil society, which is of course private initiatives, we should not be afraid of words. Civil society is all of us, and I think that after this crisis we should learn something, at least I have, and we should not allow for the schemes that we had before to be repeated. We cannot allow this. We cannot allow to have 1,600 people on a TV or a public center having, as we have, for example, in the Fernando Gómez Theater in Madrid, 4 people to switch on the heating of 5 producers when there's no production. So I think that what the municipality of Madrid is doing is so far bad communication. One person is like the whole process of destruction, and some municipal theaters may be the object of such mixed or joint management strategies, but I think that the Spanish theater has to be public, but it has to be restructured. Because if it's not, guys like the one we know of, there's 150 people in the theater, income so much, expenditure so much, and nobody has explained why this has happened, and nobody has told this guy that this structure, maybe with 50 people, is feasible. And it can continue being public. As nobody has explained this, we've only looked at ourselves and our own job, and we've realized that now all jobs are lost. And this is what's happened in Madrid. Some Illuminati says that they have to sack 400 people without thinking about anything else. So I've been asked, me and many other companies have asked, entrepreneurs have asked us to keep some of these spaces, and I shared my opinion. This is exactly what I've just said.
Bueno, si no hay ninguna otra pregunta.
Okay, if there are no further questions, it's 1:45. We're definitely behind schedule, 45 minutes behind schedule. I hope it was worth it. Thank you.